Hi guys, it's Miss Winter again. I can't believe we're already to the end of week 2 in our settlements of the U.S. unit. So here's your review video for the week. So first up, we want to talk about our European territories. Because right before this unit, we were focusing on which countries were taking land in this new space in the new world. And even though it seems like it wouldn't be that important, it really made a difference on the cultures of the areas that were being started and their purposes. So it really affected the way things turned out later on in history. So we have our 3 regions that European settlers took hold of. So down here at the bottom in this orangey color, with what's part of what's now known as Florida and what's now known as Mexico, was Spain. Now, doesn't it make a little bit of sense? In Mexico, most people there speak Spanish, and then many people in the areas of New Mexico and part of Texas and Florida, many of them also still speak Spanish. So it really did have a big impact on the types of cultures that evolved around in those areas. Spain's purpose really was to try to find gold. They wanted to become a lot more wealthy and try to help their homeland of Spain make more money too. Right here in this blue area where it covers a big portion of the middle of the United States was what France took. And France, they started to settle along the Mississippi River, and they were very interested in, I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but that's a beaver, and he's going, "Ah, don't kill me!" Because the French colonists, they were trying to find a lot of beaver fur. It was going to make a lot of money for them, so they started trying to search for a lot of beaver fur. And then England took hold of these green areas, and we can see that they are on the east coast of the United States, where the 13 colonies really were, as well as parts of Canada. And their main purpose originally for trying to come over to this new world was for religious freedom. But they also really liked the idea of the economic opportunities that having this new rich land could offer them. Spain and France had a lot more in common in their territories than England did. England was kind of like on its own, doing its own thing. But Spain and France, they were both very connected to their home countries as far as they still followed all of the same rules that their monarchs, which is like their king and queen, what their monarchs would say for them to do. They were pretty peaceful in their areas, although they did try to convert a lot of the Native Americans in their areas over to Catholicism, which is the Catholic religion, which is what many people in Spain and France believed in. But England, their territories, they were a little more self-governed. They weren't as impacted by their monarch, their king over in England, as the French and Spanish territories were. They did consider themselves part of England still though, and they still participated in the English government, but they had a little more leeway on the choices that they made. And part of that economic opportunity that we were talking about that they wanted to do in the English territories was to use this rich land, and using that land, they wanted to create cash crops. And cash crops are crops that make a lot of money. And in this time period, it was mostly raw goods. So we had things like wheat, cotton, rice. We could cut down trees and made lumber. There was indigo. In some coastal areas, they would also fish. And there was also tobacco, which tobacco is the plant that is put into things like cigarettes and smoking pipes and things like that. So all of these things are really important to know what they needed and why they needed it. So if you think about it, they have all this rich land and so much space, but they didn't really have that many people in the area. They had the Native Americans that they tried to push out, And we mentioned last week that they tried to use the Native Americans as slave labor for their plantations, their big farms. But they started to develop a different idea. And they wanted to help other countries to get something back in return. And that developed something called the triangular trade route.